problem is, they don't necessarily have a name. You kind of just do that thing.
First of all, big kudos to this creator for pointing out the fact that the way we describe sexuality matters. Although a lot of people like to believe that language doesn't build our world, that couldn't be any farther from the truth. I know this as someone with a bachelor's in sociology and a PhD in media communication who just finished a dissertation about sexual ecologies in the algorithmic age. So not only does linguistics play into the discussions that I talk about in my own research, but it also interconnects to a whole bunch of other phenomena that is interdisciplinary and very important to understand in combination. One thing that I'd like to add particularly about what the original creator mentioned is that if we're going to talk about the orgasm gap, we need to call it what it is. It's the cis heteronormative orgasm gap. It's an orgasm gap experienced by people with vulvas in cis and heteronormative relationships. If we don't call it what it is, we can't solve the problem appropriately. This is why in my own work I've discussed the idea of deconstructing binary concepts of gender and biological sex. This is likely confusing to most people, and that's okay. We've all been born into a world that existed long before we got here. But what I'm pointing out, and what the creator I think pointed out in certain words, is that the language that we use builds our worlds. And from birth, most of us in the US context have been taught that gender equals biological sex, but that's not true. And a binary of man and woman for gender or male and female for biological sex has always been categories that are exceptionally insufficient and don't describe the full variety of human experience of gender or biological sex. In the last few years, people are reporting that Americans are having less sex. Historically speaking, we can link this back to the fact that the vulva has been erased and devalued in most of human history in the US context. This means that through language, we've been referring to the vulva that includes the clitoris, not just the vagina, as the vagina. Though this may not seem like a big deal, I promise you that because language builds our worlds, if we refer to the entire vulva as the vagina, we're both linguistically and physically erasing the clitoris. The clitoris is the main organ of sexual pleasure for someone that has a vulva. And in the contemporary US context, we know that the main form of sex education has been abstinence-only sex education, which is both medically inaccurate and full of fear-mongering tactics that don't teach us anything about anatomically correct experiences of sexuality or anatomically correct body parts, which leads to people not knowing how to please their partners. This is why we need to do away with binary concepts.